And they just finished reading about Leah. And as they read about Leah, some of the ladies had a question. Did God care that Leah wasn't happy? Did God care? Was he concerned about Leah's situation and how she felt? You see, Leah did find herself in a very unhappy situation. In fact, she struggled for most of her life to find happiness. If we read about the physical descriptions of her and her sister, we can see that there's a comparison between the two, and that Rachel was found to be the one in favor. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure, and she was beautiful. If we look at what it meant that she had weak eyes, there are a few possible interpretations of this. And the first was the fact that her physical eyes were weak, that she had a hard time seeing. And this would have prevented her from being out with the sheep or the goats like Rachel was, prevented her from being as helpful to her family as her sister was. And so she was maybe less desirable, less valuable in that way, or at least she felt that way. Now some believe it also has to do with her physical appearance. When you compare it to the description of Rachel, whose figure was lovely and she was beautiful to look at, she's described as a very beautiful woman. And Leah doesn't have that same description. It's not saying that she's ugly, but she just wasn't as beautiful, as physically attractive as her sister may have been. Now there's a third understanding of what this text may be, and commentators seem to lean towards this third interpretation instead. That her eyes were weak could also be translated as to say that they lacked sparkle. That she lacked a fire in her eyes, something that would draw people to not just her physical appearance, but to her personality. Rachel seemed to have a certain something to her, a certain spunk, a certain thing that drew people in. And for Leah, that was lacking, that people weren't drawn to her in the same way. You see, it seems that Leah, for her whole life, lived in Rachel's shadow. Not just in her marriage, but even leading up to her marriage, she was always trying to live up to this image of what her sister was. She was always trying to overcome this image of a younger sister who drew more attention, who drew more praise from her parents and from those around her. And now this younger sister was going to be married first, was going to be married to someone that maybe she desired as well. She couldn't have, or she didn't have what her sister had. She found herself to be lacking. Now her father hatches a plan that puts her in the marriage bed instead of her younger sister, Rachel. And we're not told what Rachel or what Leah thinks, whether she had a choice in this or not. But she does seem to play along. She goes along with this plan, and she goes into Jacob's tent. And she's the one that goes through the marriage ceremony behind a veil, so Jacob doesn't know who it is that he's marrying. It's possible that she thinks, if Jacob can love me the way that he loves Rachel, then I will be happy. And so she goes, she becomes Jacob's wife, even though she knew that Jacob desired to be married to her sister Rachel and not her. And for whatever reason, Jacob is unable to recognize who his bride is until the next morning. After he's already consummated the marriage, after they've already been together. And then he sees his bride and he realizes it's not the one he thought. He realizes it's her sister, Leah. And so he runs off and he goes to Laban and he confronts Laban for this plan to put the wrong sister in his marriage bed. And after a week, they are both married now to Jacob. Two sisters share one husband, and the unhappiness continues. She remains in the shadow of her younger sister because her younger sister is the one that their husband loves, not her. Within the circumstance, she finds that there's one small advantage that she does have. Rachel's not able to produce an offspring, but Leah can. First she has one, then two, then three, then 4 children. And she does her best. She tries to use her ability to give Jacob an heir, give Jacob multiple heirs, as her way of gaining favor in his eyes. She has her first son, Reuben, and she says, "It is because God has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." She thinks this ability to have children will earn her love in her husband's eyes. And then she has a second son. She names him Simeon, saying, "Because the Lord has heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one also." She's starting to recognize that children don't gain favor in her husband's eyes. She still desires that love. She still desires to be made happy by the way her husband should make her feel. And so she has a third son. She names him Levi and says, "Now my husband will be attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." And with each child, it's her hope that her husband will turn his attention away from her sister and toward her. But he never does. And she remains unhappy. And Rachel's situation is unhappy too. She waits 7 years to marry Jacob. She met Jacob when he first came to town, and she knew that he desired to marry her. And this arrangement seemed favorable to her, so she goes along with it. Until her dad pulls a fast one on both of them and puts her sister in her marriage bed instead of her. And after Jacob unwillingly marries the wrong bride, Laban says to him, "Well, you can marry this one too. Just wait a week and you can have Rachel. Just finish the marriage celebration and you will have 2 wives." Now we don't know. Genesis doesn't reveal how much either daughter knew of this plan that Laban had. But we quickly see that they both became pawns in their father's plan to deceive his nephew. Now we can look at this unhappy situation. We can look at both Rachel and Leah's lives and say, yes, they're unhappy, and why, God, did you allow this to happen? But I think before we turn to God, we need to turn to some of the other people that are involved in this situation. We can blame God for the unhappy situation, but first we need to look at the role that Laban played and the role that Jacob played. You see, Laban was a brother to Rebekah, Jacob's mother. And as he saw Jacob come to town looking for a bride, he was reminded of the story of when Abraham's servant came to town with treasures both for Rebekah and for her family. And Laban would have been the recipient of these treasures, of many of them, along with the rest of his family. And he would have seen Jacob and he would have thought, yes, this is my chance to become wealthy again, to gain more, because he's going to want to marry my daughter. How can I profit off of this? But he soon realizes that Jacob came not just looking for a bride, but he came trying to save his own life. You see, Jacob, the deceiver, had deceived both his father and his brother in stealing the birthright and the blessing. And part of the reason that Rebekah sends Jacob to her brother Laban was to find a bride, but the other part was to save his life because Esau wanted to kill Jacob. And so Jacob escapes with not much more than the clothes on his back. He has no treasures. He has no gifts to offer in exchange for a bride. And yet he hopes for the same result that his grandfather's servant had when he took Rebekah back to Isaac. And so Laban thinks, well, if he doesn't have treasure, how can I profit from this man? How can I profit from my nephew? So he puts him to work. And then, as Jacob begins to work among the sheep and the goats, they begin to do quite well. The stronger ones produce great offspring, and the flocks and the herds, they grow. They produce more meat, more wool, more and more and more. And Laban sees this. And he starts to think, yeah, this is how I can profit off of him. And he knew of Jacob's desire to marry Rachel. So when Jacob names his price, he says, I will work for you for your wife's or your daughter's hand in marriage. Laban gladly agrees, and he puts him to work for 7 years. Now, in the Old Testament times, a dowry that was given to the bride's family in exchange for the bride's hand in marriage would have been about the equivalent of 2, maybe to 3 years worth of labor. And that's something that the would-be groom brought with him, that he brought out of the riches of his own family to the bride's family and offered it in exchange for her hand in marriage. But Laban sees that he has no support, that Jacob has no support of the family. So he exploits that. He says, well, I'll give you my daughter's hand if you work for me for not 3 but 7 years. And he knows that Jacob's in love with his daughter, so Jacob quickly agrees to it. He thinks this is a fantastic deal because I love her. I would do anything for her, he thinks, and so he agrees. And again, Laban's wealth increases, and more and more and more. His flocks grow and they grow. And he begins to think, well, after 7 years, what's going to happen? I'm going to lose my daughter, he's going to go back to his own country, and I'll have nothing. And so he hatches a new plan. His idea now is to put his daughter Leah in the marriage bed because he knows Jacob wants Rachel, and he works it out so that he can get another 7 years. So in total, he gets 14 years worth of labor out of Jacob for the cost of his 2 daughters. He gives Jacob two wives, and in exchange, his flocks and his herd grow for 14 years. And he becomes quite rich, quite wealthy. And so Laban uses his daughters as a pawn in his scheme to achieve his own happiness. But not only do we need to look at Jacob, we also need to look at Jacob as well as we're looking at Laban, and what role he played in Leah and Rachel's situation. You see, he left and he expected to follow the footsteps of his grandfather's servant, to find himself a wife. He comes with no gift to offer, and he thinks that he'll have the same result that his grandfather's servant did. He had deceived both his father and his brother, and now he's on the run. And that phrase where Laban says, you are my flesh and blood, he says that to Esau. There's a double meaning there. Yes, he recognizes that Jacob is his sister's son, that they are kin, they share blood, they are flesh and blood. But he also hears Jacob's story of deception, of how Jacob deceived his father and his brother. And he thinks, yeah, this is my flesh and blood. I would have done the same thing. In my scheme to get rich, I would have done what I needed to. And so he finds kin in Jacob because of the way that they think, the way that they work. And Jacob, when he comes to town, he sees Rachel and he knows immediately that she is what he wants. He says, she will make me happy. If I marry to her, that will help me accomplish my goal. To have a happy life. You see, both men, both Laban and Jacob, were more concerned for their own situation. They're more concerned about what would make them happy than about either Rachel or Leah. And so Rachel and Leah, they find themselves in a very unhappy situation. They are victims of their circumstance. They became pawns in the scheme for one man to get rich and another man to find a wife. But they quickly play into their situation as well by stepping up the competition with one another. Leah, knowing that she doesn't have the favor of her husband, she tries to use the one thing that she does have to put herself above her sister in her husband's eyes. She has kids. First one, then two, then three, then four. And she hopes, she prays that this is something that will help her to gain that favor in her husband's eye, that he will look at her rather than look at Rachel. That he will see her beauty rather than seeing Rachel's. And Rachel, while she's not an innocent pawn either, she plays into this role. She steps up the competition with her sister as well. I'm sure in those early days of their marriage that she would taunt her sister, say, well, I'm the chosen wife. I'm the one he really wanted, not you. I'm the desire of our husband's heart. And she would demean her own sister. And then as Leah starts to gain little bits of favor by having child after child, and Rachel has none, she begins to struggle and she thinks, what can I do? What can I do to change my situation? How can I make things better? And she turns and she sees her servant and she says, well, if she has offspring, that will be like it's mine. She will take my place. She will bear children for Jacob, and I will call them mine. And so she puts her servant into the marriage bed. And after the second child of the servant, she says, I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won. You see, this competition to have kids, competition to gain favor. They both were seeking their own happiness. They were both seeking to find favor in the eyes of their husband. And they made it a competition between the two of them. And Leah responds. She bears the 4 children, and after she finds that she can't have children anymore, she takes her servant and puts a 4th woman into the marriage bed. And as this servant bears 2 children, after the second one, Leah says, how happy am I? The women will call me happy. Now, as we look at this situation, in this kind of competition, in this situation where these 2 women are taking matters into their own hands, where they're competing with each other for their husband's favor, there really are no winners. And I don't think that any of us would look at this situation and say, yeah, that's a happy situation. And Leah really is happy. That women will look at her and say, happy is she. I don't think any of us would think that she was happy at any point in this journey. And yet that was her claim. And so it's at this point that the question comes up again, is God concerned for our happiness? And I would say the problem with this story is not that God wasn't concerned with the happiness of any one person in this story. But the problem with the story is that each person made their own effort to accomplish their own happiness. They didn't trust God with their happiness. No, they took matters into their own hands. And they did what they could to accomplish that. If we look back into chapter 28, as Jacob makes his escape from his father's house, and he's on the road, he meets God there. And God appears to him in a dream. And he speaks to him. And the words that he shares are almost the very same words that he speaks to Abraham years earlier, a few chapters earlier in Genesis. There we read, the Lord says, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and through your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land, and I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised. These words are a very close reflection to what Abraham heard. That promise that God would bless Abraham so that he would be a blessing, that all nations would be blessed through him, is repeated here as God promises to Jacob that all nations will be blessed through him too. And Jacob would have known, he would have seen how this blessing was carried out in the lives of his father and of his grandfather. And he should have known that God would provide for him too. That if he were to trust God with the circumstance, would trust God with the situation, that God would be with him, that God would not leave him. But instead he takes matters into his own hands. He goes and he finds his own wife, and he decides that's what he wants, and that's what he will get. And in trying to do things his own way, he helps create this hurtful situation for both Rachel and for Leah. And for Rachel and for Leah, they would have heard of this dream from their husband. He would have shared it with them. He would have shared the story of his parents and his grandparents and how God was with them too. And they should have been able to trust that this promise applied to them and to their children as well, and they didn't need to take things into their own hands. They did not need to compete with one another and create the situation that they found themselves in. And yet they too tried to do things their own way. They tried to work things out so that it came to their own favor. They worked things out so that they received what they wanted, so that they would find themselves to be happy. Rather than to rest on this promise of God's faithfulness, they tried to work things out in their own favor. And I think that we do that too. We expect that God will show up. God has promised that he will show up. And when he doesn't, or when he doesn't show up in the ways that we think that he should, we find ourselves disappointed. We find ourselves asking the same question, does God care about my happiness? In the back of our minds, we have made up what might make us happy. And when God doesn't give us those things, we say, well, why doesn't God care? Where is he? Is he going to show up? Is he going to make me happy? And to answer this question, is God concerned about our happiness? I would say that the answer is yes, that God does in fact care. But he also cares about our faithfulness. He cares that we trust him. He cares that we put our lives and our situations into his hands. And that we wait for him to work out things according to his plan. He wants us to trust him to provide for all our needs instead of trying to do what makes us happy. Now we can have an idea of what makes us happy, but we don't always see the cost of this happiness. We don't always have a full understanding of what I think it takes for me to be happy. It may cost somebody their happiness. It may cost somebody else. It may have a great cost on them. When we set out to achieve our own happiness, we can have the same effect that Jacob, that Laban, that Rachel, and that Leah all had on each other. But when we trust God with our circumstances, when we trust God to work through our circumstances, regardless of whether or not we find ourselves in happy circumstances, then we can trust that he will also use them to have a positive effect on others. And we can trust that he will carry us through. What I like about the story of Rachel and Leah is not the competition between siblings, but rather the fact that there is evidence that God does show up. As Leah gives birth to her fourth son, she's able to say, "This time I will praise the Lord. This time I will turn to God and I will give thanks." in my circumstance, regardless of what's going on, I can recognize that God has blessed me with 4 beautiful children. And so she does praise the Lord. She recognizes that God has been at work in her life, and that as unhappy as she has been, God has been faithful. And this promise that God gave to Abraham, the same promise that God gave to Isaac and to Jacob, is fulfilled through this 4th child. God's son, Jesus, came through the tribe of Judah. It's through Leah's son that God fulfills the promise to bless his people so that they can be a blessing. And it is through Christ Jesus our Lord that we too become heirs of this promise as well. And so we can expect that we will experience blessing. But the reason that we experience blessing is so that others will be blessed through us. And we also know that the blessing that we experience isn't always what we think it will be. It may not come in material wealth. It may not come in favor in man's eyes or woman's eyes or anyone else in our life. But it comes through favor in God's eyes. God doesn't always do what we think he should do. But when we are faithful, he can work through our circumstances, and he does work through our circumstances so that we can be a blessing to others. As I was preparing this message, there's a verse that came to mind that fit very well, and it's been a favorite of mine since grade 10. You see, in grade 10 religion class, I had to preach a sermon, my very first one. It was on Romans 8, verse 28. And I can tell you, I remember very little about this sermon. But I do remember this verse because it's one that's carried me through. And this verse reads, "And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Now, as I said, I don't remember much about the sermon, but what I do remember was struggling with this idea of what good means. Quite often we find ourselves in situations that we don't think are good, that we say aren't good. I'm sure if Leah was here, if we were to ask her, she'd say that for most of her life she didn't think that her situation was good. But as I thought about this text again, as I thought about this verse again, I thought, God doesn't ask us to define what is good. He doesn't ask us what we think is good. And he certainly doesn't want us to try to accomplish what we think is good on our own. No, he asks us to trust him. He asks us to trust that he will work according to his plan, and that his plan is for our good. He wants us to trust that he knows what is good for us, and that he will accomplish this in his own time and his own way. I actually heard a saying about this verse recently. When we say that all things work together for our good, when things don't feel good, it's because God isn't done working yet. And the scary thing, the hard thing about this is that things may never feel good in this lifetime. Things may never go according to our plan of what is good or what feels right or what makes us happy. But we can trust as we read scriptures like this that God does work out his plan, that God is good. And that because God loves us, because God is a loving God, that it will work out for our good, that he has a plan for it all. There's one last image that I want to leave you with. We're called the children of God, and I think this is very fitting, that God calls himself our Father. Because one of the biggest factors that has shaped my understanding of how God interacts with his people is becoming a father myself. Being a parent has had a huge effect on how I understand God. Because I often ask for things, and I know the answer is no. I often have an idea of what might make me happy, and God says no to me, the same way that I might say no to my child. Our children ask us for things. They want things. And I actually thought about it. It'd be an interesting experiment. Now, don't try it if you have young children. It would be an interesting experiment for a week, maybe, to give absolutely everything to your kids that they ask. And to see how happy they are at the end of the week. You know, they may be happy for a couple of days, but I think they soon find themselves miserable and asking for more and more and more. Because like children, we don't have a full understanding of what makes us happy. But God does. We think we know, but God knows better. But then again, this question of, does God really, is he concerned for our happiness? I still think he is. And this image of a parent and a child speaks to that as well. Because I know for me as a parent, it brings me great joy to see the smile on my children's face, to see them happy. And God does call himself our Father. And I think when he sees us struggling to follow and to serve him, and to find joy in the moment of our circumstances, that he looks down and he smiles too, that he takes great pleasure in us experiencing joy in him, in us trusting him and seeing how he is at work in our lives. So, in answer to the question, yes, God does have concern for our happiness. But even more than that, he has concern for our faithfulness. Because when we trust God, he will take care of it all, and he will provide moments of happiness. Even in our darkest moments, he will provide moments of peace, even when we don't think we can be happy. Let's find joy in him together. Let us pray. Dear Father God, we give thanks for stories of your faithfulness, not only in Scripture, but in our own lives. And we give thanks, Lord, that you have proven yourself faithful time and time again, Lord. And in times where we meet the dark night of our suffering and our pain, we don't understand where you could be and how you could be at work in those situations, Lord. We pray that you may speak your truth, that you may make your presence known, Lord, and that you may remind us that you are faithful, even when you don't do what we think you should do. Help us to give up our own will, Lord. Help us to submit our wills to you. Help us to trust you with the results of our whole lives, our whole situations, Lord, no matter how dark they may be. And help us to look for your truth and your grace in those moments as well. In your name we pray. Let's join together in singing Like a River Glorious. And let's stand to sing.
Christmas perfect.
Dear Father God, as we look outside, we're reminded of your presence as you shine your light down on us. The warm sun, the beautiful weather is a reminder that you are with us, Lord, that you watch over us. And we give thanks to you, Lord, that this weather is an opportunity for many of our farmers, Lord, to be out in the fields, to remove the crops, Lord. After a cold and snowy fall, Lord, it's good to have the opportunity to bring the crops in. And so we pray, Lord, we give thanks for this weather, and we just pray for safety for our farmers. We pray that as they put in long days trying to rush to get the crops off before the weather turns again, that you may watch over them, that you may provide safety in the fields, Lord, and safety on the road. We give thanks, too, for safety on the road as many of us travel many distances, Lord, and we're reminded of two of our own, of Dennis and of Simon, Lord, who experienced traffic accidents, Lord, and in these accidents they were spared. They were spared significant injury, Lord, and you spared their lives. And we just pray, Lord, for continued healing for them. We pray that you may be with them, that you may show them that you are present among them, Lord, and that you may bring healing to their hearts and healing to their bodies where that's needed. Lord, we pray that you may bring healing to all those who are hurt. Bring healing to those who are suffering physical ailment, Lord, or pray those that are suffering depression or other forms of mental illness, Lord. We heard about how you desire our happiness, Lord, but you also desire our faithfulness, Lord. And in many times, in many situations, we find ourselves unhappy. And we pray, Lord, that you may speak to our hearts.